Millionaire calls. Cops on Black Maid. Over-stolen gold watch. The truth leaves him speechless. The sound of expensive leather shoes echoed against the marble floors of West Manor. Julian West, 30, striking with his tailored navy blue coat slung over one shoulder, stepped into the grand foyer with the same commanding presence that made boardrooms go silent. His blue eyes scanned the interior of his mansion like a man surveying his kingdom. Everything was as pristine as always. Glass chandeliers glittered above him, fresh lilies stood tall in the vases, and the faint scent of citrus polish floated in the air. But something felt off. He paused by the side table in the main hallway, a place where he always left small valuables, cufflinks, loose cash, and most importantly, his father's gold wristwatch. It was an heirloom passed down from his grandfather, a rare 1960s timepiece with a custom engraving only Julian knew how to read. It had never left his house. Never. His heart gave a sharp jolt. The table was empty. Julian blinked, then slowly turned over the items on the table, as if the watch might be hiding beneath them. He opened the small drawer below. Nothing. His brow furrowed. A tightness began to form in his chest. This wasn't just a watch. It was his last memory of his father, the only man he had ever truly respected. He called out for Charles, his butler. "Where is my watch?" Charles, a greying man with a gentle voice and calm demeanour, looked confused. "I'm not sure, sir. Serena cleaned this area yesterday." Julian's eyes narrowed at the name. Serena Miles, the maid. She had worked at the mansion for nearly 2 years. Quiet, graceful, never caused trouble. Always on time, always in uniform. Polite to a fault. Still, trust was a dangerous game in Julian's world. Before he could dig deeper, heels clicked against marble. Madeline appeared at the top of the grand staircase, like a queen descending her throne. Her platinum hair was swept back in a sleek bun, and a silk robe clung to her flawless figure. She walked toward him, a sly smile tugging at her lips. "Back already," she purred, kissing his cheek. Her tone was too sweet. Julian sensed the performance. "My father's watch is missing," he said coldly, pulling away. Madeline's smile faded. "What? Oh no, are you sure?" "I don't lose things," he snapped. She paused, glancing towards the hallway, then leaned closer. "Didn't you say Serena was dusting in your study yesterday?" His jaw tightened. "Yes." Madeline's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's just, I've seen the way she looks at your things, especially the expensive ones." Julian frowned. "Are you accusing her?" Madeline shrugged, placing a manicured hand on his chest. "I'm just saying, Julian, things like this don't go missing on their own. Maybe it's time you took a closer look at who you're letting into your life." The seed of doubt was planted. Julian turned away from her, walking into the study. The room was just as he'd left it. Neat, minimalist, no signs of forced entry. But his instincts were spiraling. He pressed a button under the desk, unlocking the hidden drawer where he sometimes stored sensitive documents and valuables. Empty. The watch was gone. Madeline stood in the doorway, now arms folded. "Call the police." Julian hesitated. He wasn't a man who liked involving outsiders in his affairs. But this wasn't just about theft. It was betrayal. Personal. He nodded. Within the hour, uniformed officers were walking through the mansion, speaking to staff. Julian stood off to the side, hands clenched behind his back, watching silently as Serena was called into the foyer. She walked in slowly, her dark eyes calm but guarded. Her black and white uniform was crisp, her braided hair pulled neatly into a bun. Her beauty was understated, dignified. She stood with grace, but Julian noticed her stiffening under the weight of the room's gaze. "Serena," one officer began gently, "we need to ask you a few questions. Something has gone missing." Serena glanced at Julian. "What's missing, sir?" "My father's gold watch." Her eyes widened, but only slightly. Not panic, not guilt, just sadness. "I didn't take it," she said softly. "I would never take anything from you." Julian didn't speak. He just stared at her, his gaze heavy, searching. The officer continued. "Would you mind if we searched your quarters?" Serena hesitated, then nodded. "You're welcome to." She turned and walked ahead of them with quiet dignity. But Madeline's voice rang out mockingly from behind, loud enough for the whole staff to hear. People like her always act innocent, until they're caught. Julian didn't look at Madeline, but her words echoed in his mind. Minutes passed. Then the officers returned. One of them held up a small velvet pouch. "We found this hidden beneath the mattress," he said. Julian took the pouch and opened it. The gold watch gleamed inside. The world tilted. Serena stood still, her face unreadable. "I didn't take it," she repeated, her voice trembling now. "I found it in a place it shouldn't have been. I planned to return it this morning." "That's convenient," Madeline scoffed. Julian stared at her. For a moment, something inside him wavered. Doubt. But his pride was louder. "Arrest her," he ordered quietly. The click of the cuffs echoed in the hallway. Serena didn't struggle. Her eyes locked with Julian's, and there was no anger in them. Only a quiet, piercing disappointment. "I always respected your father," she whispered. He would have known the truth. Julian's throat tightened. But it was too late. The officers led Serena away, and the heavy mansion doors closed behind her. Silence fell. He looked down at the watch in his hand, and for the first time in years, Julian West felt unsure of everything. The air inside West Manor had never felt colder. Despite the soft lighting and gleaming chandeliers, something had shifted the moment the velvet pouch was opened. The gold watch, with its intricate design and timeless weight, glimmered in Julian's palm like an omen. His jaw clenched as he looked up at Serena, whose face remained composed, though her deep brown eyes glistened under the heavy silence. "I didn't steal it," she repeated, her voice soft but steady, each word wrapped in dignity. "I found it. I was going to bring it back today." No one spoke. The gathered staff looked down or away, unwilling to meet her gaze. Some of them had worked alongside Serena for years. They knew her heart, her habits, her quiet kindness. But no one dared speak, not with Julian standing there, stone-faced and silent. Madeline stepped closer, her silk robe swishing with each calculated movement. Her arms were crossed, a delicate smirk dancing at the corner of her mouth. "Found it under your mattress," she said, her voice sugary sweet with venom beneath. "That's an interesting place to temporarily keep someone else's gold watch." Serena turned slightly, looking at her. There was no anger in her expression, only heartbreak. "I didn't put it there." Madeline gasped, pretending to be offended. "Are you suggesting I had something to do with it?" Julian's eyes flicked between them, but he remained silent. His pride, his bruised ego, wrapped around his throat like a fist. "Serena Miles," the officer said as he stepped forward, voice low and rehearsed, "you are under arrest for suspicion of theft." Serena blinked. Her lips parted slightly. "I didn't... Please, this is a misunderstanding." "We have to take you in," the second officer said, sounding apologetic. You can speak to a lawyer and explain everything at the station." The crackle of handcuffs echoed louder than thunder. A sharp gasp came from one of the younger housekeepers, who dropped the silver tray she'd been holding. The sound of shattering china bounced off the marble floor. Serena flinched as cold metal locked around her wrists. Julian still hadn't said a word. He stood frozen, gold watch clutched in one hand, the other tightening into a trembling fist by his side. Tears began to fall, slowly at first, streaking down Serena's smooth brown skin like rain sliding down a stained glass window. But she stood tall, head lifted, back straight, heart shattered. As the officers began to guide her toward the door, she paused in front of Julian. She looked into his eyes, not begging, not pleading, just seeing him. One last time. Seeing the man his father once was proud of. The man who had, without a shred of proof, believed the worst of her. "You'll regret this," she whispered. The room shrank around them in that moment. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. It was prophecy. It was pain. Julian's throat worked, but no words came out. The front doors creaked open as the officers led Serena out, her head bowed against the cold wind. The staff murmured among themselves, hearts sinking. They all knew what just happened wasn't justice. It was judgment. Fast, unfair, final. Madeline stepped beside Julian, looping her arm around his. "Well, at least that's over," she murmured, her voice purring with triumph. "Let's have breakfast. You need something warm." But Julian didn't move. He stared at the door Serena had just exited, the last echo of her words clawing through his chest like a knife. "You'll regret this." For the first time, the mansion felt too large, too quiet, too empty. He slipped the watch into his pocket and walked slowly toward the study, closing the door behind him. But peace did not follow, only silence and guilt. The sun rose like it always did, painting the walls of West Manor in golden light. But nothing felt the same. The echo of heels across marble had faded. The scent of fresh lavender no longer drifted from the hallway Serena used to clean so carefully. Her absence wasn't loud, it was silent, heavy, like a missing heartbeat in a room full of life. Julian West sat at the long mahogany breakfast table, staring blankly at the untouched plate in front of him. Eggs, toast, coffee. Everything prepared just the way he liked. But none of it tasted right. It was like chewing through cardboard, his senses dulled by the weight sitting on his chest. Charles, the butler, stood quietly near the door, waiting for instruction. But Julian hadn't spoken more than a few words since Serena was taken away 2 days ago. "She really loved working here," Charles said gently. Julian's fork paused mid-air. "I don't want to talk about her." Charles bowed slightly. "Of course, sir. But the damage was done." The thought had already clawed its way back into Julian's mind. Serena, soft-spoken, kind-eyed Serena, always humming under her breath as she dusted the window panes, always tucking fresh flowers into forgotten corners of the mansion. Gone, accused, arrested. Because he allowed it. Because he believed the wrong person. Julian shoved his plate away and stood. "I'll be in the study." The study was the only place in the mansion that still felt his. He closed the door behind him, letting the silence envelop him. He pulled out the gold watch, the one that had sparked this unraveling, and stared at it. He ran his thumb over the engraving. To Julian. "Always be better than me. Dad." A bitter laugh escaped his lips. "Not even close," he muttered. He tucked the watch back into his pocket and sank into his leather chair. For hours he sat there, lost in thought. The more he tried to silence the guilt, the louder it screamed. But something else had begun to gnaw at him. Little details, odd things. The morning of the incident, the hallway surveillance had been off. The camera above the study door, the only one that would have caught someone near the table, showed a black screen for nearly 45 minutes. When he asked the security staff about it, they'd shrugged. Glitch, probably. It happens. But glitches didn't happen in a house like his. Not with the kind of money he poured into his systems. Then there was Madeline. She had been different, too eager, too controlling. When Julian questioned the staff about the timeline, one of the maids mentioned seeing Madeline near the guest wing just before the pouch was found. But when Julian asked Madeline, she'd casually denied it. "You must have misheard. I was in the spa. Her smile had been too smooth, too easy." That night, Julian lay in his king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling. The silence stretched long into the night. He finally drifted into sleep. But what came was not rest. He dreamed of his father, not as he was at the end, frail and bedbound, but strong, dressed in his old hunting jacket, hands rough and worn with wisdom. They stood in the old orchard behind the family estate. The trees were white with the blossoms. His father turned to him, voice low but firm. "Look closer." Julian frowned in the dream. At what? But his father didn't answer. He just placed the gold watch into Julian's hand, closed his fingers around it, and whispered again. "Look closer." Julian jolted awake, heart pounding. He sat up, drenched in sweat. The dream clung to him like fog, too vivid to ignore. He stood, walked to the study, and unlocked the security cabinet. It took him only a few minutes to download the surveillance logs and backup footage. If someone had tampered with the camera system, the logs would show it. And there it was, an override code used during the blackout. His eyes scanned the logs. His blood ran cold. It wasn't a system glitch. It was intentional, accessed by someone with his highest level clearance. Madeline. Julian leaned back slowly, the realization wrapping around him like barbed wire. The camera footage had been disabled at the exact time the watch had gone missing, and re-enabled just after Serena's room was searched. His stomach twisted. Madeline had planted it. She had framed Serena. And he had let her. The man who built an empire, who saw through boardroom lies and million-dollar schemes, had been blind in his own home. He had destroyed an innocent woman's life. His hands trembled as he shut the file. He didn't know where Serena was now. Jail? Home? With family? Wherever she was somewhere far worse than she deserved, and he had put her there. The storm outside began to rage, lightning flashing across the long windows. But inside Julian West, a storm far more dangerous had begun to rise. The truth, the guilt, and the first spark of redemption. Julian West couldn't sleep. Even after hours of reviewing security logs and drinking 2 glasses of the finest bourbon, the weight in his chest hadn't lifted. The house, his grand estate built from steel and stock, felt hollow. The chandelier above him sparkled with deceptive brilliance. But beneath all that glittering wealth, a truth had begun to unravel. A truth he could no longer ignore. He pulled up the security footage again. He hadn't wanted to see it before. When Serena had pleaded her innocence, he had chosen to look away. It had been easier to believe the lie, easier to follow Madeline's convenient version of events than to confront the uncomfortable possibility that someone else, someone he trusted, had betrayed him. But now He couldn't stop watching. Frame by frame, he reviewed the hallway near his private study. The last known location of the gold watch. The timestamp blinked. 8:32 a.m. The footage was blurry at first, a little pixelated. But then he saw it. Madeline, clad in a white silk robe, hair in perfect waves, glancing around like she didn't want to be seen. She stepped toward the study door, paused, then slipped inside. Julian froze the footage. Why had she been in his study? He had been away. She had no reason to be there. And when questioned, she'd said she was at the spa. She lied. He let the video play. 5 minutes passed. Then she emerged again, holding something small in her hand, a velvet pouch, the same pouch that had been discovered in Serena's room. His breath caught. The world around him blurred for a moment as the reality of what he was seeing sank in. The woman he had once considered his future, his fiancée, had lied, not just to him, but about Serena, about everything. He leaned back in the chair, raking his hand through his hair. His heart pounded against his ribs like a war drum. "Why?" he whispered. He opened another folder. It was a saved recording from the day of the arrest. The living room camera. He had barely watched it before. But now he studied Serena's face with new eyes. She had looked broken, betrayed, hurt in a way that went deeper than false accusation. Her tears had been real, not desperate, but disappointed, as though she expected more of him. Then he saw it. The moment she looked at him and said the words that had haunted him since, "You'll regret this." Her voice hadn't been full of hate. It had been full of truth. She knew something. And then something else tickled at the back of his mind. Her final glance at Madeline. Julian rewound the footage. Watched again. Serena's eyes hadn't only locked onto him, they'd flicked sideways, cold and knowing, to Madeline. And her voice had cracked when she said, "You'll regret this." It wasn't just for him. It was a warning about her. Julian stood abruptly. He remembered another detail now. An argument. Days before the watch went missing, he'd overheard Serena and Madeline in the hallway. The door had been cracked open. "You think you can just waltz in here and make everyone love you," Madeline had snapped. "I'm just doing my job," Serena had replied quietly. "You're too comfortable. Don't forget where you stand." He hadn't thought anything of it at the time. Petty jealousy, he'd assumed. Maybe Madeline didn't like sharing attention, even with the help. But now it reeked of something else, of fear, insecurity, malice. He realized with a sick twist in his stomach, Serena had been calm during the accusation, not because she was hiding guilt, but because she knew Madeline had framed her, and he had still let the police take her away. Julian paced the floor of the study, the ticking of his father's old wall clock the only sound in the room. His head pounded, his palms itched to do something. Fix what he'd broken, rewrite what had been done. He turned on his heel and headed straight to the hallway. Outside Madeline's bedroom door, he paused. For a second, doubt crept back in. But then he remembered the footage. The lie. The look in Serena's eyes. He knocked. No answer. He opened the door. Madeline lay sprawled across silk sheets, headphones in, smiling as she scrolled on her phone. "Julian," she said, startled when she saw him. "Is everything okay?" He held her gaze for a long moment. "Where were you?" "The morning the watch went missing." She blinked. "I already told you. The spa." "Don't lie again." Her smile faltered. "Excuse me?" "I watched the footage. You were in my study. You lied." She sat up now, the calm cracking. "Julian, I can explain." He stepped back, cold rage brewing in his veins. "I believed you," he said bitterly. "I let you ruin an innocent woman." Madeline's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Julian turned and walked away without another word. The spark had been lit, and there was no turning back now. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside Julian West's chest. Thunder rolled across the hills as lightning flickered behind the stained-glass windows of West Manor, but none of it compared to the war erupting inside him. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't sit. He couldn't stop replaying Serena's voice in his mind over and over. "You'll regret this." And he did. God, he did. Hours had passed since he confronted Madeline. Her silence had told him everything. She hadn't cried. She hadn't denied it. She hadn't even tried to twist the story into something else. She just sat there, exposed, lips trembling, mask falling away. And yet, something still gnawed at him. Julian needed more than instinct. He needed proof. Something that went beyond corrupted security logs and suspicious behavior. Something real. That's when he remembered the study safe. Not the one everyone knew about, but the real one. The one hidden behind his father's massive oil painting, an inheritance of paranoia, tucked into the wall like a secret spine. His father, Richard West, had been meticulous, distrustful, especially in the final years of his life. "The people closest to you," he used to say, "will one day be your undoing if you don't learn to watch." Julian hadn't understood then, but now it echoed like prophecy. He pulled the painting back and keyed in the old code, 0429, his mother's birthday. The safe clicked open with a soft hiss of dust and age. Inside were documents, a small box, and a tiny black device wrapped in velvet. A camera, one of the old models, covert, nearly invisible. Julian blinked, stunned. The timestamp on the label read from over 4 years ago. His hands shook as he carried it to the study desk and plugged it into the monitor. The footage loaded slowly, dragging time like wet chains. Then he saw it. The hallway, the study door, the morning of the theft. Julian's breath stopped. Madeline appeared on screen, eyes darting, body tense. She reached into her purse and pulled out the gold watch. She looked around again and quickly slipped into the study. Julian fast-forwarded. She emerged 3 minutes later, wristwatch missing. Then, seconds later, she walked briskly to the hallway closet. Serena's cleaning cart sat neatly parked, filled with supplies. And Madeline? She stuffed the watch into the folded rags at the bottom, like it was nothing, like she hadn't just shattered someone's life. Julian recoiled from the screen as if it had slapped him. He stood there, numb as the footage looped silently. His father's voice echoed in his mind again. "Look closer." And he had. Now the truth stared back at him, cold, clear, undeniable. Madeline framed Serena. His knees gave out. He dropped into the leather chair like a man who'd just been shot. Guilt crashed down in waves. He saw Serena's tear-streaked face, the way her voice trembled, the quiet dignity with which she'd accepted the cuffs, the strength in her eyes even as her world caved in. She had known. She had tried to warn him, and he hadn't listened. Julian clenched his fists. His stomach churned with a nausea deeper than anything he'd ever known. He thought back to the beginning, how quick he'd been to doubt Serena, how easily he had let stereotypes whisper in his ear. She was quiet, yes, but she had never been anything but loyal, efficient, kind, graceful under pressure. She had served his family for years. She had picked up after his guests, cared for his home, brought his sick mother soup when no one else remembered she existed. And he had allowed her to be dragged away like a criminal. Tears pricked his eyes, real, raw, unfiltered tears. He whispered brokenly, "What have I done?" He looked at the screen again. Madeline's figure froze mid-frame. She wasn't just a liar. She was a thief, a manipulator. And he had loved her, or at least thought he did. Julian wiped his face and stood. He knew what he had to do now. He was going to make this right, no matter what it cost him. He was going to find Serena, apologize, clear her name, and if she would allow it, he was going to tell her the truth. That somewhere along the way, her grace had begun to undo his arrogance, that her strength had pierced his pride, and that maybe, just maybe, losing her had been the only thing that could wake him up. The rain had calmed, but Julian West's mind hadn't. The storm within him still raged, thundering louder with each secret uncovered. His mansion, the same place where decisions were made in silence and wine was poured without question, was now the epicenter of a truthquake, shattering the foundations he once trusted. He couldn't sit still. Since finding the hidden footage, he hadn't stopped. He needed answers. Every hour that passed without speaking to Serena was agony. But as he waited for his legal team to work on her release, Julian dove deeper into the life of the woman he had wrongly condemned. And what he found turned his guilt into awe. First came the revelation from Rosa, the elderly head cook who had worked at West Manor since Julian was in grade school. With shaking hands and a sorrowful tone, she pulled Julian aside. "Mr. West," she said quietly, "there's something I didn't say before. I didn't want to get in trouble. But now—" Julian gave her his full attention. Rosa reached into her apron and handed him a small notebook. "I found this in the laundry after Serena left. She must have dropped it." Julian opened the notebook slowly. Inside were neat notes, dates, receipts, donations. One hospital name appeared repeatedly. St. Mark's Children's Center. Julian's heart paused. That was his father's favorite charity. A modest but vital hospital for underprivileged children in the inner city. After his father died, the donations had slowed, then stopped. He'd meant to resume them, but life and business had gotten in the way. And here was Serena, donating what little she had, monthly, quietly, consistently. Every note in the ledger read like a whisper of grace. Julian swallowed hard as tears welled up. How could he have missed it? She had never boasted, never sought praise. And while he was busy attending galas and fundraisers for applause, Serena was giving what she could in secret, to a cause his father had cherished. Julian flipped another page, and his breath caught again. There, taped between the sheets, was a photo. A group of children, smiling, holding up signs. "Thank you, Miss Serena." "Our angel." Julian's vision blurred. He closed the notebook with shaking fingers and leaned back against the marble counter. A lump formed in his throat, choking him. His mind traveled back to the night she was arrested. The quiet way she walked, chin high, eyes wet but proud. She hadn't just been wrongly accused. She had been protecting something. A memory stirred. 2 days before his trip, he'd seen Serena standing near Madeline's room. She had looked torn, nervous. He hadn't thought much of it then. But now, he rushed to the security server once more. He needed to know what Serena really did after she found the watch. 2 hours later, after piecing together deleted clips and restoring lost timestamps with the help of his IT head, the truth finally unfolded. Serena had entered Madeline's room, likely to clean. She found the gold watch in Madeline's drawer. She didn't confront her. She didn't report her. She simply stood there, shocked, disappointed, and for a long time, still. Then she walked away, watch in hand. Later, Serena went to the storage office. There, she unlocked a small cabinet, one only, staff used, and slipped the watch inside, locking it tight. She left a note taped under the drawer. Julian rushed to the same cabinet. And there it was. The note read, "I didn't know what to do. I found it in Miss Madeline's drawer. I didn't want to embarrass you, Mr. West. You've lost so much already. I thought I'd return it quietly when the time felt right. Please forgive me if I chose wrong." Julian pressed the note to his chest. It was as if the air had been punched out of his lungs. He stood there for minutes, crushed beneath the weight of her kindness. She hadn't stolen from him. She had protected him from public scandal, from the pain of knowing his own fiancé had betrayed him. And still, he let her walk away in cuffs. That was the moment Julian West broke. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of sorrow, out of reverence. Serena Miles wasn't just innocent. She was extraordinary. Julian West stood at the threshold of his own home, like a stranger. The mansion felt colder now. Not from the autumn wind brushing through the grand open windows, but from the frost that had settled deep inside his chest. Every echoing footstep, as he walked down the hallway, sounded like a judgment, a reminder of the moment he lost himself. He didn't knock when he entered Madeline's room. She was standing by the vanity, curling a loose strand of her glossy blonde hair. Clad in a silk robe, draped in ease and entitlement, she didn't look up right away. "I had Rosa bring in the new champagne," she said absently, looking at her reflection. "Figured you'd want to celebrate when you got back from the office." Julian stood still, silent. That's when she turned and saw his face. Pale, tight-jawed, eyes rimmed with exhaustion and something else she couldn't place. "You look awful," she said with a soft laugh, but it lacked conviction. Julian took one step closer. "Don't play games, Madeline." She froze, the hair curler lowering to the dresser. There was a long pause, too long. Then, with a casual shrug, she sat down. "So, you figured it out. No panic, no denial, no desperation, just indifference. And it stunned him more than any lie ever could." "You knew," he said, voice raw, "that I would accuse her. You knew what it would do to Serena." Madeline's expression was unreadable. Her lips curled just slightly. "I did what I had to do." Julian's heart pounded. "You framed her." Madeline stood now, slowly walking to the window. She was getting too comfortable, too noticed. "You looked at her differently, Julian. And maybe you didn't realize it. But I did." Julian blinked, disbelief burning behind his eyes. "I looked at her differently," he echoed, stunned. Madeline turned. Her tone was ice. "Do you think I was going to let a maid come between me and the life I've been building since I was 15? I've shaped myself to fit beside you, to match you. And she was ruining everything." He took another step forward, voice shaking with fury. "She's twice the woman you ever were." A sharp silence cut the air. Madeline's smile finally cracked. A flicker of hurt danced across her eyes before it hardened again. "You don't mean that. You're angry. You feel guilty. You'll get over it." No, Julian said with finality, voice low but powerful. I won't. He pulled the engagement ring from his finger and placed it on the glass coffee table between them. The sound echoed like a gavel hitting stone. Madeline's lips parted, but no sound came out. It's over, he said. You were never the woman I thought you were, and I was a fool for not seeing it sooner. Madeline crossed her arms, jaw tightening. And what now? You run after your sweet little maid? Tell the world your fiancé framed the help? Ruin your name? I already ruined it the moment I let Serena be dragged away in cuffs. Julian's voice broke slightly. You know what the worst part is, he whispered. It's not that you lied or stole. It's that I let someone good, truly good, get destroyed in front of me. And I did nothing. Madeline looked away. For the first time, shame cracked her carefully constructed mask. But Julian wasn't waiting for her to feel guilt. He turned and walked away without another word. With each step out of that room, the weight began to shift. He still carried the guilt, the regret. But for the first time, he also carried something else. Clarity. It wasn't just about ending things with Madeline. It was about becoming someone worthy of Serena's forgiveness. It was about choosing truth over pride, love over power, and right over comfort. And as the grand double doors shut behind him, Julian West wasn't the same man who had stood by while Serena Miles was falsely arrested. He was a man ready to fight for her, and for the second chance she never asked for, but deserved. Julian West sat in his black SUV at the edge of a narrow block lined with colourful aging buildings. It was nothing like the world he'd known. No marble pillars, no valet service, no expensive silence. This neighbourhood was alive. Laughter spilled from open windows. The scent of roasted corn and baked bread wafted from a corner food cart. Bikes lined fences. Music played somewhere faintly in the distance. But Julian barely noticed any of it. His blue eyes were fixed on one figure across the street. Serena Miles. There she was, wearing a simple mustard yellow blouse tucked into jeans, her thick braided hair tied into a high ponytail, and her smile, God, that smile, lighting up the entire sidewalk like morning sun. Children rushed toward her like gravity pulled them. "Miss Serena!" a little boy with skinned knees cried, arms open wide. She crouched down, scooped him up without hesitation, and kissed his forehead. "You been running wild again, Marcus?" "No, Mom," he lied, grinning. "You say that every week." She laughed. More kids appeared, dozens it seemed, all grabbing at her arms, legs, skirt, and she didn't shy away. She opened herself to them. Her presence was magnetic, warm, healing. Julian felt something twist in his chest. This wasn't a woman broken by betrayal. This wasn't a victim curled into bitterness. She was thriving. Across the street was a worn brick building labeled Community Hope Center. Inside, Serena was guiding a small group of women, young mothers, students, grandmothers, teaching them how to build resumes, apply for jobs, handle interviews. "I know what it's like to feel invisible," she was saying, as Julian quietly slipped through the back entrance and stood near the doorway, hidden behind a shelf of old books. "But you are not invisible. You are not less. You are not a mistake," Serena said, voice soft yet firm. "You are strong, and we rise stronger when we rise together." The women applauded quietly. Some wiped away tears. Julian's hand gripped the wall behind him. He couldn't breathe. He had seen powerful women in boardrooms and ballrooms. He had watched politicians give speeches and CEOs pitch billion-dollar ideas. But none of them had the power Serena held in that room. Power born not of money or status, but of love, truth, and quiet resilience. What had he done? What had he almost destroyed? After the session, Serena gathered her things and walked towards the back door. And then she saw him. She froze. Her eyes locked onto his, those cold, ocean-blue eyes that once looked at her with judgment. Now, they were filled with something else. Regret. Shame. Longing. He stepped forward. Serena. Her name cracked from his throat like glass under pressure. She didn't respond. She simply blinked, composed, guarded. Julian lowered his head slightly. I came to say I'm sorry. She stayed silent. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I don't deserve your time. But his voice broke. You were right. I do regret it. Every second. Every choice. I was blind, and I let someone evil paint you as guilty when you were only ever good. Serena looked down for a moment, her fingers fidgeting with her bracelet. I wasn't just protecting your watch, she finally said, voice calm but heavy. I was protecting your memory of your father. I knew what that watch meant to you. Julian felt the tears sting his eyes. You did more than I deserved, and I repaid you with humiliation. Serena's expression softened, but she didn't let him off easy. You broke me, Julian. You didn't just call the police. You stood there and said nothing as they cuffed me, in front of your staff, in front of me. A tear rolled down Julian's cheek. I know, he whispered, and I hate myself for it. The silence was thick. I ended it with Madeline, he added. I know it doesn't undo what I did, but I couldn't continue living in a lie. She admitted everything. Serena blinked, but her expression remained unreadable. Why are you really here? She asked. Julian hesitated. Because I saw the truth, not just in Madeline, but in you, and I want to earn the right to look you in the eye again, even if it takes forever. Serena didn't respond. Instead, she turned away and walked back toward the children playing on the sidewalk. They ran to her, without hesitation. Julian stood there, watching her kneel down and tie a shoelace, wipe a child's nose, braid a little girl's hair. There was a lump in his throat that wouldn't go away. He hadn't come expecting forgiveness. But now he understood. Redemption doesn't come when you're ready. It comes when you're willing to walk through the fire and stay in it until the one you hurt decides you've earned your way out. And for Julian West, redemption had only just begun. Julian West stood backstage in a crisp navy suit, but it felt heavier than any he had ever worn. The tailored shoulders couldn't hide the weight of what he carried in his chest. Outside, cameras clicked, journalists murmured. Reporters from every major network waited in the courtyard of the West International headquarters, unsure what the sudden press conference was really about. Was it about Madeline? The broken engagement? A corporate scandal? Only a few had begun to whisper the name. Serena Miles. Julian closed his eyes. This wasn't for image. It wasn't for stockholders. It was for her. He took a deep breath, then walked toward the podium as the crowd quieted. The flashing lights struck his face like judgment, but he didn't flinch. Thank you all for coming, he began, voice clear but heavy. This won't be your typical press conference. The murmurs stopped. I'm not here to spin a story. I'm here to tell the truth. Because the truth is, I was wrong. And someone good, someone kind, paid the price for my failure. He paused, and the silence grew thick. Her name is Serena Miles. A ripple went through the crowd. Julian looked straight ahead. She was falsely accused of stealing my late father's watch, an item I held sacred. I let my fiancé at the time manipulate my fear and grief. I let class and color blind me, and I stood by while Serena was humiliated, arrested, and treated like she was less. A few gasps were heard. Julian didn't waver. Serena is innocent. She was always innocent. But I didn't see it, because I didn't want to see it. And that is the truth that haunts me. He paused again, throat tight. She was more than a maid. She is a teacher, a leader, a role model in her community. While I was chasing numbers and boardroom glory, Serena was building futures. She volunteers at the Hope Center, mentoring kids, helping women rebuild their lives. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters took notes feverishly. I came here today not to protect my reputation, Julian said, but to ask the world to see Serena as I failed to say in front of you all, I am sorry. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry for not standing up for her. I'm sorry for not trusting her. I'm sorry for using my power to tear down someone who deserved to be lifted up. For a moment, he looked down at the podium, then back up. That's why today I'm personally donating $10 million to the Hope Center. In Serena's name. A collective gasp surged from the crowd. It will be used to expand their programs, provide college scholarships, fund job training, and build a second location in another underserved neighborhood. This is not charity. This is justice. Click, click, click. But this isn't just about money. I've also hired an independent legal team to investigate how the arrest was handled and whether my staff or myself violated Serena's rights. And I've submitted myself to a formal ethics board review. More murmurs. Reporters were stunned. This wasn't damage control. It was redemption in progress. Julian's voice lowered, filled with something softer now. Serena, if you're watching, I know a press conference can't undo what I did. I know $10 million can't erase the pain of that day. But I will spend every day trying to become a man worthy of your forgiveness, not just for what the world sees, but for who you are. He stepped back, but before leaving the stage, he added one final line. To the world, she was just the maid, but to me now, she is the standard. And with that, Julian walked off the stage. No applause, no grand exit, just silence, and the echoes of a man who had finally chosen truth over pride. Serena Miles sat alone on the worn leather bench just outside the Hope Center, fingers wrapped around a steaming paper cup of herbal tea. The early evening breeze tugged at the loose strands of her braided hair, and the sky above melted into shades of dusky purple and soft gold. Inside, the whispers were loud. Everyone had seen it. The press conference, the apology, the donation. Julian West had laid himself bare to the world. For her. And still, Serena's heart was quiet, uncertain. She wasn't the kind of woman who trusted easily. Not anymore. Pain had taught her to be careful. Betrayal had taught her to keep walls. And Julian, he had taught her how quickly someone you think is decent can turn into someone who makes you feel invisible. She sipped her tea slowly. Across the street, his car waited. He hadn't asked for a meeting. He hadn't sent flowers or begged forgiveness. He just waited. Every day for the past week, he parked outside the Hope Center, never crossing the line, never forcing a word, just sitting, sometimes reading, sometimes watching the kids, sometimes staring at his hands like they weighed 1,000 pounds. It was the silence that moved her most. One day she finally walked over. He stood when he saw her. No smile, no hopeful gleam, just respect in his posture and something unreadable in his eyes. Humility, maybe. Pain. Julian, she said evenly. Serena, he nodded. A long pause. She folded her arms. Why are you really doing all this? He didn't answer right away. I don't know how to live with what I did, he finally said. But I'm trying to become someone who would have stood beside you that day. Someone my father would be proud of. Someone you could look in the eye. She studied him carefully. Words are cheap, she said. I know, he replied. That's why I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to see me, as I am. Not the man with the mansion, not the one who hurt you, just a man who's trying. Another pause. Then, softly, she asked, Do you know what that day did to me? Julian swallowed. Tell me. I couldn't breathe, she whispered, eyes suddenly wet. I couldn't believe I'd meant so little to someone I served loyally. You looked at me like I was dirt, and then you looked away, like I didn't matter. He didn't defend himself. I'm sorry, he said, voice trembling. I failed you in every possible way. She looked down. My father left when I was young. My mum scrubbed hotel floors to keep food on the table. I worked hard to build a life of dignity. You ripped that dignity from me in 30 seconds. Tears rolled freely now. Julian stepped closer, but didn't touch her. I didn't know your story, he said, because I never asked. I saw your uniform, not your soul. A heavy silence fell between them. And then Serena whispered something that made his knees go weak. My dream was to start a foundation one day, for girls who look like me. Girls told they're only meant to clean up after others. I wanted to show them we can build, lead, thrive. Julian blinked rapidly, his throat tight. I want to help you do that, he said. No credit, no spotlight. Just let me help. Serena looked up at him for the first time that day. In his eyes, she didn't see pity or guilt. She saw something deeper, respect, or hope. You don't get to fix this with a check, she said gently. I know, he said. But maybe I can start with showing up, over and over, until you believe I've changed. Her voice was barely audible. It still hurts. I'll sit with you in that hurt, he said, for as long as it takes. And for the first time, Serena didn't walk away. They sat side by side on the edge of the center's steps, just listening to the wind move through the trees and children's laughter echoing in the distance. She didn't offer forgiveness yet, but she let him stay. And in that small, quiet moment, healing began. It wasn't grand gestures that moved Serena. It was the quiet ones, the way Julian bent down to tie a little boy's shoes before walking him home after homework club. The way he never brought security guards with him, even though the neighborhood was rough. The way he picked up paint and helped scrub the vulgar graffiti from the side of the Hope Center, without a single camera around to catch it. The Julian West she knew before had moved through life with arrogance and cold grace. The one she saw now, he moved with care. He didn't speak unless necessary. He didn't demand attention. He didn't try to buy her forgiveness. He earned space, day by day. At first, she'd been cautious, wary. She'd watched him with folded arms as he helped stock the pantry, sought book donations, or mow the front lawn of the center when the groundskeeper called out sick. But then one morning, Serena came in early to unlock the center and found Julian already inside, quietly fixing a broken sink in the girls' restroom. "Where'd you learn plumbing?" she asked, brow arched. He looked up from under the cabinet, a smear of grease on his cheek. "YouTube." She laughed. She hadn't meant to, but it slipped out, soft and real. That was the moment it began to shift, from tension to tenderness. They started talking more, about little things at first, favorite books, their childhoods. Serena told him about her mother's cooking and her deep-rooted belief that dignity was something no one could steal, even when all else was taken. Julian told her about his father, the watch, and how wealth had never filled the hole that grief left behind. Their conversations stretched into long walks after the kids were gone. Some nights they'd sit on the rooftop of the Hope Center, watching the stars poke through the clouds while the city hummed below. "I never liked silence," Julian once admitted, "until I met you. With you, it doesn't feel empty." Serena didn't respond right away, but her eyes held softness. One afternoon, a young girl at the center tugged on Serena's hand and pointed to Julian, who was stacking canned goods. "Miss Serena," she whispered, "is that your boyfriend?" Serena choked on her tea. Julian chuckled from across the room, but didn't correct the child. Later, he said quietly, "Kids say the wildest things." Serena raised an eyebrow. "Do they?" His smile faded into something more serious. "I just want to be whatever you'll let me be in your life. Friend, partner, supporter. Just don't shut me out." She said nothing, but she didn't walk away either. And slowly, brick by emotional brick, something beautiful was being rebuilt. One night, after an event at the center, where Julian refused to sit at the front table and instead served food to the guests, Serena found him sitting on the rooftop again, looking up at the sky. She sat beside him, brushing a strand of hair from her face. They didn't speak for a while, and then, softly, Julian broke the silence. "I don't want to lose you again." It wasn't a plea. It was a confession. Serena turned to him slowly, heart tight. "I'm not easy," she whispered. "I don't forget pain overnight. I carry it with me." "I don't want easy," he said. "I want real. I want you." And for the first time since it all began, Serena smiled, a genuine, open smile that reached her eyes. "Then stay," she whispered. "Stay. Keep showing up." Julian reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. The stars above them glimmered brighter than ever, and beneath that vast, forgiving sky, two souls began to heal. Not through money, not through apology, but through love, redefined. The crowd was quiet, anticipation humming through the air like the prelude of a sacred song. The ballroom was grand but not gaudy, filled with city leaders, activists, families from the community, and young girls in pressed dresses holding small notebooks, ready to take notes not on wealth, but on greatness. The banner above the stage read, "Inauguration of the West Miles Foundation, Building Futures, Restoring Dignity." But all eyes weren't on the banner. They were on her. Serena Miles. She stepped onto the stage with grace that didn't need announcement. Wearing a deep emerald dress that hugged her curves with elegant modesty, her thick braids cascading like a crown. She carried the kind of beauty that radiated from soul, not style. And standing just a respectful step behind her, dressed in a simple tailored grey suit, was Julian West, not as her rescuer, not as a man taking credit, but as a partner. He never touched the mic, never asked for applause. He was simply there, to hold the moment steady, not to steal it. Serena approached the podium. Cameras flashed. The audience leaned in. She inhaled deeply, grounding herself in every hardship that had led her here. Then she began. "I was once the invisible one," she said, voice steady and warm. The girl who scrubbed marble floors while people walked past like I wasn't there. The maid who accused, arrested, discarded like my dignity didn't matter. You could hear a pin drop. But tonight, she continued, eyes wet but unwavering, I stand not as the woman they tried to break, but as the woman they couldn't. Applause thundered, but she held up her hand gently, silencing it. Let me be clear, she said. This is not a story about revenge. It's a story about transformation, about how pain can either make you bitter or make you brave. Julian looked at her, eyes glistening. She turned slightly toward him. I owe my survival to the strength my mother taught me, to the resilience I had to earn, and to the man who was once blind, but chose to see. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Julian West didn't save me, she said. He believed in me after it cost him, after it was uncomfortable. And that's what true allyship looks like. More applause. She went on to talk about the women the foundation would uplift. Maids, single mothers, women leaving abusive homes, girls of color told they were too loud, too dark, too nothing. From scholarships to skill centers, we're building pathways, she said. Not out of charity, but out of justice. When she finished, the room erupted. But Serena didn't bask in the praise. Instead, she stepped down and walked to a group of young girls sitting in the front row. She knelt, eye to eye with them. You are worthy, she whispered. Not when someone says you are. You always were. A little girl with tightly coiled curls whispered, I want to be like you. Serena smiled and placed her hand on the child's heart. Be like you, sweetheart. That's more than enough. Later, as guests mingled, Serena and Julian stepped onto the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle like stars scattered on earth. You did it, he said softly. No, she replied. We did it. But more importantly, they'll do even more. Julian turned to her, reaching for her hand. Where do we go from here? He asked. She looked at him with a calm, radiant smile. Forward, she said. Always forward. And with the night wind carrying their quiet laughter, they stood side by side, not as the powerful and the powerless, not as the wronged and the guilty, but as two healed hearts walking boldly into a future they would build together. Serena Miles, once a maid, now a founder, a voice, a leader, had become not only a role model for her community, but a symbol to the world. That grace, when forged in fire, becomes unshakable.